There we go. Wow, that was a fun little animation. Looks like we're live, folks. I'm going to wait just a minute or two for people to trickle in and get some critical mass before we officially get going here. But I'm so excited to see y'all. I see Ananth, I see Leo, my teammate. I see Oleg, I see Aaron, I see Gleb, our CEO. I see Matt, I see Sean. We got a good crowd here going, and I'm pretty excited to hang out with everyone here. And then just a heads up, just so I can stay immersed in delivering value to you folks in a set of demos, I'm going to leave it to Leo to be chat champion. And then he'll interrupt me live on call if it's worth, addressing that question via some oral dialogue versus directly through text in the chat. All right? All right, very cool. I'm going to wait one more minute here, and then we'll rock and roll. All right? All right, cool. It looks like we're ready with the 10 folks here. Let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can take it from there. All righty. Okay, you should be able to see this. For Datafold, our main kind of value proposition is we want to make sure we solve problems and fight fires before it's already too late when things are wrong in production. And that's why I joined Datafold, to make that reality so much less painful for everyone working with data. And how we're going to tackle that kind of big pie in the sky kind of claim is through a couple things here. Understanding what are the specific problems we're solving, just so we all have the same reference point for how this actually solves, things that matter to us, and understanding what that looks like from a single player development experience to a multiplayer deployment experience, and understand how we kind of immerse you in a proactive workflow, whether you're a data team of one or a data team of 10, 20, 50, 100, what have you, right? And to get into that, I always love to start with some of these anecdotes that I think probably trigger a lot of maybe mini traumas for everyone here. Or essentially you get these like, hey, data looks kind of funky, like, can you fix it? And I know in my 7 years of data engineering consulting how much I scrambled and did fire drills and like was pulling up my hair in order to answer some of these doubts, because it wasn't just about the mechanics of, hey, this dashboard needs to be right. It's just like, dang, if I don't fix this well enough and fast enough, like, this business person will probably never trust me again and build their own shadow IT team and run Microsoft Access databases in Excel. And yeah, I digress. But I want to make sure you don't have to live through that fear every single time you push a change into prod. And I think what illustrates this workflow the most is what your kind of data pipeline transformation process may look like today. And this isn't to be condescending on anyone here. This is just addressing the reality that there's still missing gaps in the mechanics and the tools to solve these problems in the first place, where a lot of the times you see fires happening here, or you just think, oh, there's only one fire. The frustrated stakeholder was like, hey, numbers look off. But you didn't realize there were a bunch of kind of surprise little fires along the way that built up into this inferno. And I think what's tragic about this is you don't even know about those roaster fires until a business user alerted you. And you shouldn't have to live through that second guessing set of fears every time you make a change into prod. And so what I want to kind of exemplify here is, I'm going to go through this illustration of crawl, walk, run of like, what does it look like to use, our Data Diff CLI, to using our VS Code extension, to using our cloud integration with the Data Diff CLI, to what does this look like in a PR and flowing through all the way. And I'll even show you some Looker along the way. And if you folks stick around, Leo may have some fun bonus content to share with you all. All right? So with that in mind, I'm going to do some role playing here. Let us say I am an analytics engineer I'm tasked with updating my orders model for whatever reason because the numbers or amounts look off. And these are kind of hypothetical changes I'm making, but this is really just to illustrate the core mechanics here. So I run this. I'm going to do a dbt build s orders because I'm like, okay, I need to fix this. Here's a quick hot fix. I just need to make sure green check marks happen all around. And I'm like, okay, green check marks all around. I get a little dopamine hit. I think I'm in the right direction. And I'm just going to merge this into prod, right? Because I'm frazzled. I want to solve this fire. But if you had something that looked like this, in order to solve that problem in the first place, you'd probably think to yourself, okay, I'm doing a data diff between my development instance of orders, which is just created, versus what's already existing in prod. And now I get to see, hey, here's exactly what's going on. So I have just ultimate confidence in understanding my before and after story versus just relying on a bunch of green check marks and just thinking that my intuition on what I should test is enough. Because I think we can all agree when it comes to data, what makes it so difficult is that it is such a stateful experience where like you want to make sure that each row is doing exactly what you want, that the SQL logic and even testing it after the fact only give you heuristics around how good it looks, but it doesn't give you that complete picture. But now I look at this and say, hey, here are the values updated. But I think to myself, like, I actually want to see those values because this is just giving me a summary report card. I wish I had that. That's where, if you click on this extension over here and run this, what it's going to do is run a lot of these similar mechanics behind the scenes and then show you a better report card along the way. And so over here, I get the same thing in a cleaner UI. So I can, I don't have to dig through terminal history each time I run my data diffs. And then from there, I get to see, I see a couple things here. I see this changed, but this is where the real value is. Bam! I get to see with the utmost confidence, this is exactly what's going on with my data changes, similar to like Git diffs that we see in VS Code all the time. Here, let me see if I have a good example. I don't. Never mind. But essentially, like this is what I get to see. And if I want to filter it even further, I only get to isolate the rows that had that particular change, right? Whether it's remove rows, added rows, what have you. But in this case, it's just the change rows. And what's really nice about this is like, I get this natural kind of intuition where I didn't have to like poke around with ad hoc SQL queries, work with full utter joins to make this happen. I just got to click a couple buttons and just move on with my life and just do the thing. And I think that's what's so charming about this is like, wow, like, yeah, data diffing is a pretty simple mechanic, but there's a lot of extra overhead to make it feel like it's worth doing each and every time, right? Because I'm sure for those in the chat, like how many times have you had to run like ad hoc full utter joins just to make sure that these two, are doing what you want? And like you do that 20 times in a row and you get to a certain point where you're burnt out and you're like, this ain't worth my time anymore, right? Now, in addition to that, it's like, hey, like, do we just, throw away the Data Diff CLI now that the VS Code extension is out here? And for those that want to know what that looks like, you just type in Datafold, you go here, and Shazam. There we go. And I'm going to post it in the chat later where you can just download that directly if you don't have VS Code open right now. Totally fine. But again, back to my earlier point, you're probably thinking like, do I throw away the Data Diff CLI now? And the answer is, heck no. That's where you do something that looks like this, where it's like, hey, I want to kind of bridge the single player and multiplayer experience in data diffs because I don't want to have to keep sending screenshots of this, right? Because this is all local to my computer. That's where when you add that cloud flag and essentially make sure that you point it to the Snowflake data source. In this case, this is ID 6357. You find this in the Datafold page. I can show you that UI a bit later. But this will kick off a data diff very similar to this in the VS Code extension. And what's cool about this, it gives you that summary report and it'll show you a much more, I should say, fuller report card where you get the kind of summary report card that you expect. You get the values tab. But what's also really nice is you get a column profiles tab where if you want heuristics around like, hey, what is the distribution of changes that I'm making just to make sure you can even empathize with the end user because they're probably going to ask the same questions of like, whoa, numbers look really off. Why do they look so off? Oh, it's because we really changed the fundamental distribution of the amount column. Like if we're going to do this, because we may want this change, right? Because let's say we were grossly miscalculating ARR for whatever reason. We want to name to end users like, hey, folks, you're going to see something that looks like this. Here's a link to it. Like this is going to be the distribution of changes that you see, right? And that just takes 5 seconds with this link versus what 30 minutes of DMs back and forth in Slack or Teams, and like just a lot of tedious conversations you're probably not going to have because it's not worth that level of effort, right? In addition to schema changes and primary keys, if they're exclusive to any single table, you just get that full detailed report card. And what's so nice about this is you get this in a couple seconds versus each of these tabs is what at least 5 ad hoc SQL queries in and of themselves, right? All of those things that you just don't have to care about anymore. And that's why I'm so excited, kind of excited to brag about this. It's not all like just the bells and whistles that come with it. It's like, oh, look at all the toil I just don't have to care about in my life anymore and move on with my workflow, right? All right, cool. And so from there is great. I made all these changes, but I don't want to have to like hop screenshots around and like, can this be embedded in my kind of pull request workflow that I know and love since I'm already doing that as an analytics engineer today? And the answer is, heck yeah, we do. And so over here, I made a simple pull request where essentially, let's see if it's already in this UI. Beautiful. This is what I want to see. Or I made this pull request over here. I'm going to just click into the GitHub UI. But essentially, I already ran this where I essentially push the commit here. And what it does behind the scenes, or not behind the scenes, up front, it shows you, hey, I'm going to run the pull request job, right, to run the changes in scope. And then I'll also run my the data diff itself. And what's really nice about this, it gives you that same report card embedded within the workflow, right? So you don't have to do too much context switching. But let's say, hey, I actually want, a deeper experience with this, very similar to what I did with the CLI and VS Code. That's where I click on this, and it shows me, some changes along the way. And this is from an earlier commit, but actually, let me even show you live what that could look and feel like, just so you know it's not all smoke and mirrors here. So I'm going to do this, another quick change, commit, and then I'm going to sync it. I want to hop back over here, and fingers crossed the demo gods are on my side so that nothing goes wrong. And Shazam, you're going to see a couple things kick off. These are some good signs that this PR is doing what I want to do. It's running the pull request job, and then it's going to wait. Datafold is going to wait for this to be successful before it runs everything else. Perfect. And then other than that, let's see here. Oh, yep, same thing here. And also what's really nice too is like, you're probably thinking like, hey, like, do I have to configure primary keys each time in order to make sure it knows how to, even make that data diff happen in the first place? I think the answer is no, because we do something where, one, we can take in these primary keys if we want, but what's really nice about this is that even if you just leave in place your unique and not null tests, we read these in within the DBT manifest and essentially say, hey, like, we're pretty sure 99% of the time this is the primary key you care about. And typically follows like DBT kind of testing structure, configs, best practices too. And I would know this because I worked at DBT Labs the past 2 years before I joined Datafold here. All right. So I'm going to go back and then over here, Shazam. Now Datafold should be kicking off. I'm going to refresh this just to see. And then Shazam, I should say. It's waiting for things to build. Cool. But that's pretty much it. All you're really going to see is making sure there are green check marks here and it's doing what I want. Shazam. This is exactly what I expect. I made a couple changes to customers and the orders table here. What's really nice about this is if you're making iterative changes throughout your pull request experience, you get to understand kind of even a metadata diff, right? To understand, hey, what was the data diff at this iteration versus that iteration? So that when you're working with teammates in that multiplayer experience to troubleshoot, there's a clear audit log and audit trail to understanding all the changes throughout. So you have ultra confidence that when you actually merge this into prod, there is pretty much very little doubt that there are going to be surprises here, right? And that's what's so exciting about this. Cool. I think evolving this story even further is what we recently kind of released is Looker lineage. And that really starts at the PR level over here, where I think to myself, oh, hey, I see a couple diffs here. But what's really nice about this is, in addition to what we already had, which is a mode and a high touch integration, you get full column level lineage impact in your pull request workflows when you make a change to any model that affects that. And what's really powerful about that is, I'll even click on this just to show you, where it's going to open up directly to that lineage view. And it's going to show me a couple things here. I'm going to update the default here, where essentially I get a full set of column level lineage impacts. And even when I highlight like, hey, I made a change to like list price, it'll show me that full audit trail to understand how it flows all the way from my raw layer through into the BI layer. And now you're thinking to yourself like, oh, hey, like, is it looking at the manifest? Like, what fancy mechanics is it using behind the scenes? What's really beautiful about this is it's using query history. So it's merging and marrying the logs between your Snowflake queries and Looker configs and make sure that those are bridged together. And so, for example, let's say, you see extra nodes here. That's because it's accidental lineage on top of your DBT lineage. And I typically see that with customers when like a business user builds an ad hoc table on top of a DBT model and don't communicate with the DBT analytics engineers in the first place, right? And so this even surfaces those kind of surprises because we're using query history behind the scenes. And what's really powerful about this is a couple things here, where you don't just get simple like, hey, it affects these things within Looker. It shows you great detail across how a Looker view impacts an explore, impacts a look, impacts a dashboard here, right? And you get that same, you get that same level of impact throughout. And now you're wondering to yourself, like, hey, what the heck are these dotted lines, Sung? Well, over here, that shows lineage also flowing in through transactions from other respective nodes within your overall lineage. And so this helps you understand, like, hey, what are other even confounding variables in my pull request workflow, just to make sure there are no surprises going on, right? And so, in summation over here, we're just really excited. And keep in mind, I only did this in like, 15, 20 minutes here. We're really excited that like all these experiences, all the toil in your life that you don't have to have anymore in your DBT workflow and your data engineering workflow are just like kind of melt away. And you just kind of get to focus on the work itself rather than fiddling around with like ad hoc SQL scripts and screenshots and DMs that are frankly just a waste of your time. And I hope we all live in a world where like we're just one step closer to that sense of immersion, sense of flow state, not just when it comes to the single player experience when building data pipelines, but the multiplayer one, right? And that's where you see that across from VS Code to the CLI, all the way into the PR and lineage workflow. And so, yeah, that's about it that I wanted to share with you folks. And intentionally so, just because we really wanted to open up to questions and have a dialogue here. But yeah, with that in mind, Leo, any other kind of questions worth emphasizing here before we share some bonus content?
Hi there. Guess I'll pop in. So not a ton of questions in the chat. Definitely encourage folks to jump in. There is some good discussion. A few questions about how to get open source Data Diff up and running. And for that, I would say, we definitely want to work with you, and honestly, probably book time or have a chat by email or in the DBT Slack, because everyone's configuration is pretty different. There was one question from Matt about using multiple databases, multiple CRUD databases, and for that we support a state flag that allows you to specify manifest JSON files. So that was a good question. Yeah, I guess I should introduce myself a bit. Sung already mentioned, but I'm Leo. I'm on the team. Sung and I work hand in hand every day, and both really passionate about improving data quality testing. Let's see, there was one other around. Oh yeah, this is a one that I love. Are we Anonymous asking, does lineage work without DBT? Does Datafold work without DBT? The answer is yes and yes. And so, yeah, it's we have integrations with dbt Cloud and Core, but it's not a requirement. Lineage is dependent on parsing query logs. So we do support Databricks. That's another question in the chat. And Snowflake, BigQuery, a variety of Postgres databases. Redshift, of course, is Postgres style. And so, yeah, all of those, we would parse the query history, build lineage, look at the information schema, no dependency on DBT. And as Sung mentioned, this could actually help you if you do use DBT to surface non-DBT tables that might be upstream or downstream of DBT due to, unhinged warehouse activity that's just happening. And so, yeah, those were a few questions that came up. And I see a few more coming in right now. So
Yeah. We can do this Twitch live stream style, Leo, here a little bit,
love
and
it.
I'll address some of these questions. Just Michael, just to emphasize your point here. Same thing with like we'll look at Databricks query history in order to marry lineage across all those respective data apps, such as like Looker, High Touch Mode, right? We just use the DBT manifest just to isolate things in the pull request workflow and the lineage relevant to the pull request itself. And so that's just the distinction to make here. Ananth, I saw your concern about but lineage without relationships and keys. Well, most of the time, if you're using things like Snowflake and Databricks, like they don't enforce those relationships, right? And so that's why using that query history, it shows like, hey, how are these tables created along the way? And that lineage is a pretty good representation of that. If you want to add those relationships and keys, I highly recommend using DBT model contracts or configuring those yourself, whatever data tooling you're using. If you're using Spark, for example, that works too. What about multi-project repos with a master project and several child projects? It depends on how if you're using DBT depths to import them, it just really depends. I would say, actually, I really can't give you a good short answer to that because there's just inherent complexity to doing like DBT multi-project repo experiences. Like there's a reason why DBT Cloud is building out DBT Mesh to solve that problem, because there isn't like a really great elegant answer for it now. And I would know that since I drove the DBT Mesh story, and I worked at DBT Labs for like 2+ years. And so if you want to get into it, it's just really specific to your setup. But like there are answers to it. It just really depends because some people treat each of these multiple repos as like islands, and they don't really talk to each other. Some of them inherit them through DBT depths, and that approach is wildly different in how Datafold interjects into that. Okay.
Yeah. So as DBT Labs rolls out their mesh product, we'll be working with them as much as possible to ensure that our CI diffing is integrated seamlessly with that. But there are some unknowns at the moment. We don't get to we don't hear all the details as the sausage is being made. I do have though I think kind of positive, confident comment that in our lineage you would see all those DBT projects and the dependencies between them, because if there is a project that depends on an upstream project and those tables are built by selecting from an upstream project, that would surface in the query history.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. I'm looking at some of the query history parsing. How accurate is this? Honestly, seeing is believing. So Ananth, like if you want to have a conversation and like actually, put our money where our mouth is, like we'll send a calendar link, we'll schedule that time, and we'll show you just how accurate this lineage really can be, right? And then constraints on Snowflake without DBT, but constraints are not enforced. It depends. Snowflake, the only thing they enforce is not nulls, and so that's a really good one. And so even in your DDL for Snowflake table creation, we'd recommend trying that.
I would
Let's see it.
say another thing just to note on the enforcement of constraints is that DBT does not enforce constraints. DBT will run tests that will test for conditions. And so you might have a relationship test that will pass or fail, but that's not technically enforcing a constraint in like a traditional database sense. Along the same lines, the DBT DAG is not an ERD. So you don't see those primary key foreign key relationships. And to connect this all, Datafold lineage is also not an ERD. So you would see the columns listed. So it's actually got like that ERD component that the DBT DAG lacks, because you actually do see the columns listed, but the lines between the nodes do not represent relationships between primary and foreign keys, but rather just like the DBT DAG, what's upstream and downstream dependencies. So I think that's like, it can get a little bit confusing when we're talking about these things, and there's lines between tables. And I would love to see, to be honest, more ERDs out there, in the wild. And then, maybe that'll be maybe that'll be Datafold 3.0. But that's above my pay grade.
Cool. And then I saw a question from Oleg on, are you planning on integrating with ClickHouse? Um, I would say not yet, but we're open. We're just looking for more and more demand coming in from customers and prospects here at this time.
Yeah.
And you're part of that story. So
Yeah, we're actively building out more database support. So, for example, support for SQL Server is underway. That's one we've been hearing about for a while, and
yeah,
I'm excited to ship that.
yeah,
Yeah, so we'll
um,
definitely make note of ClickHouse as
yeah,
of interest. We actually use ClickHouse internally, so very
yeah.
familiar.
And I think that serves as at least a loose segue, Leo, um, to like showing off like something that's an alpha today that
Sure,
I think the crowd here would be really really intrigued by here.
sure.
Um, and so while you're setting that up, I'll address some of these other questions here, Leo. All right.
Sounds good.
Ananth, you asked, can we build a driver for Teradata? Um, are you asking me or are you volunteering yourself? I'm assuming you're asking me. Yeah, that's definitely on our roadmap. We're definitely hearing signals that Teradata matters here. And so, yeah, more of a not yet than anything else. Because we have every incentive to build out as many database integrations as possible just by nature of our product, right? And so, literally, the more databases we can support, the better.
Yeah, and I'll just validate or add my anecdotal experience that Teradata support is being requested by a few interested parties, and so it's definitely on our radar. Yeah, so I just wanted to show what is kind of a new use case that we are seeing a lot of interest in for Datafold Cloud, and that is diffing between databases. So, and I mean diffing truly between one data source and another. So that could be Snowflake and Postgres, as you see here. It could be one Snowflake account to another Snowflake account for whatever reason, or Snowflake to Redshift. And so I just have a little example of what that looks like. And so in this screen, you're just seeing a diff between a Snowflake table and a Postgres table, around 6 million rows. And we see about 1,000 rows that are in Postgres, but not in Snowflake. And then there's one row with actually a conflicting value. So if we look at the primary keys, we can see the rows that exist in Postgres, but not Snowflake. And if we look at the values, we can see, this says done in Postgres, it says processing in Snowflake, and also the end of that is populated in Postgres, but not in Snowflake. So why does this matter? Why would anyone want to run this sort of diff? The truth is, as I think you all know some of this answer already, is that data teams are moving data around every day, in particular with Fivetran, with any Python scripts that are running ETL, replicating data from, let's say, a prod data source to your Snowflake cloud data warehouse. And they want to know, did that replication occur successfully? Is the data intact on arrival? Is it corrupted? Are rows missing? Are rows spontaneously appearing? Who knows? It's millions, billions of rows sometimes. And so as you saw, that was just one example of a diff, but what we're setting people up with starting, in the last few weeks and picking up from here is regularly scheduled diffing jobs that essentially validate the replication of data from source to target, from your prod database to your cloud warehouse. And then you can set a schedule, set up a simple notification that says, the data matches exactly, or the data has new rows, but it's like within an expected range, or there are actually conflicting values. All of the underlying technology here, there's kind of two things that are worth noting. One is that this is all data diffing, just like Sung showed you. Instead of a git diff, it's a data diff, and everything we're doing and shipping here is really based around that principle that you can get a tremendous amount of value by looking at a data diff. The other thing to note is that this is diffing between databases. So like a lot of what Sung walked through, you could do using SQL queries. It would be cumbersome and you know, slow, basically, error prone, but it could be done. But to run a diff between two databases, that is a little bit of a trick because you can't just run SQL to do that. So some of you are familiar with our open source package. The technology is out there. You can kind of see how it's done. It is open source, but what we're doing is providing orchestration, scheduling, alerting, a rich UI so you can see this in the cloud, enterprise security, sort of whatever is needed to get you up and running with this replication validation. Or if you are in the midst of a large migration from, let's say, Redshift to Snowflake, or from some legacy tech to any other modern data stack tech, then you could also validate that, let's say, your transformation jobs have this exactly matching output, that your source data that is being lifted and shifted matches exactly, and so on. So yeah, definitely curious if that resonates with anyone. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, I have this, this migration and I'm kind of just spending a lot of time or hoping that it worked out, or I move data every day from Postgres to Snowflake and, I think it's working. This is meant to just be a really light way of getting that validation and knowing as soon as it's broken so that it doesn't ripple downstream.
Yeah, I think that's a good story. Like for the chat here, just ping in the chat. Is anyone going through a data migration right now? I'll pause for a couple moments here. Okay, Matt, you are. Just I guess real quick, like what's the source to target here? Oh, look, you're typing. Here we go.
While Sung is, we're seeing, all right, I'll let you reply, Sung, but I also want to hear about replication. But yeah, let's look at Matt's use case.
Yeah. We can talk about Redshift to Snowflake. Yep, I've seen that time and again, during my time at DPT Labs. Migrating from legacy Databricks to better Databricks. Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah, I mean, both of those we work with, honestly. Yeah, happy to feel free to fill out that form I sent earlier. I'll just send it again just to make it ultra clear, just so you can schedule time with us. And you get routed to the right person, either me or Leo. Align time zones, all that fun stuff, right? So there's that piece. Let's see here, and I'm curious to Leo's question again. Like, does anyone have like replication validation issues? So for example, I'm using Fivetran to replicate transaction backlog or transaction in Postgres and dumping that into Snowflake, but there's a lag or like data quality isn't quite there in that raw layer. Curious to see in the chat. Just say we are.
Could be Fivetran or anything else is the other thing. Yeah. Oh, we got a we are from Sean.
Okay, nice.
That's a good emceeing tip, Sung. I'm going to use that next time. I'll give people the yes, no, we are.
Yeah.
So
okay. And I'm curious, like, you just use simple words here. I'm not going to make you write prose, but essentially, like, is it a data drift issue, or it's like similar to what Leo was showing? It's like, oh, it's like missing a couple thousand rows because of lag. That may invoke. Actually, maybe I should make the frequency higher, for example. Or is it like just data quality? Like it's just like not casting the types right. I'm curious.
Another thing that comes up sometimes is folks, it's not that it's a problem that is in their pipeline, it's that they want to know what the lag is so that then they can take an action. So in some cases, they want to know what the primary keys are that are lagging, and then they kick off another process to kind of refresh everything. So that's worth noting. It's like, it's not like you're policing or, double checking. It's that there's going to be a lag and you need to know what's lagging.
Yeah. Just more predictability in the workflow, right? Okay. There's that piece. Okay. So Matt, Michael, Sean, would love to have conversations with you folks after this using that link. I think that's really exciting. And like, we want to make sure that that's less toil for you. That's the dopamine hit I care about.
I think that should be the name of a horror flick, The Lag.
Yeah, exactly. Written by Jordan Peele, right? He would do it justice.
Or Kimball, yeah.
Yeah, or Kimball. All right. I guess just switching gears a bit, because I know the main kind of substance of this conversation was around just like Datafold and the general kind of transformation workflow. I guess for the Datafold transformation portions of this, like what resonated with folks here? Um, and I'll leave you folks to think about that while I answer Sean's question here. We do have snapshots to track history, but not very reliable either. Got it. Yeah. So essentially, you're trying to solve this through snapshots, but you know, it, inherently there'll always be gaps in there, right? Because snapshots are just a time and place when you run that snapshot versus like a true replication, right?
Yeah, the other thing is, well, if you have snapshots in Snowflake, then the other thing you can do is run data diffs between snapshots. So that's actually a pretty practical use case. It doesn't require cross-database diffing technology, but you could, for example, schedule repeated diffs between from snapshot to snapshot. Another thing to note is if you do use Snowflake or BigQuery, we support diffing using their time travel functionality. So you can actually specify points in
Mm,
time, assuming you have time travel set up for that point in time, and then run diffs. So you could diff day over day on kind of on a schedule. So there's a lot of these use cases outside of CI, which is why I like to emphasize that what we do at its core is data diffing. Where exactly that fits in is really depends on your team. I think diffing DBT models in CI is a very common use case. Most of our customers are doing that, but we do have customers who are diffing SQL code in CI that's not DBT, and then there's kind of a long tail of these other use cases that we've touched on.
exactly. Michael, I see your question. Short answer is yes. Yeah. For Databricks time travel, yes, we do. Um, yeah, you can literally do that today with Datafold, which is really nice. Change data feed with Delta Lake. Yeah, that sounds really hard to maintain. I'll say that. Goodness gracious. Godspeed to you, Michael. Cool. I guess I'll say this. Which, hmm, nah, never mind. Never mind. I was going to ask a silly question here, but I was going to essentially say, like, was this worth your folks' time? Or maybe I'll frame it kind of like in a negative. Oh, thank you, Michael.
Getting a yes,
I
yeah,
feel like
okay.
it's missing from this conversation.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, what would be, maybe like if there was anything that was most worth your time, if there's anything that you want us to touch on more, either right now or we can like follow up one-on-one, or we do more of these things in the future. We'll definitely be digging more into, as we get more and more people using that Looker integration, we'll probably do a richer demo of that. And along the same lines as we bring more and more people into that cross-database cloud diffing. Those are two things we'll be really, really focused on in the coming months.
Exactly. Cool.
We got at least Sean typing, maybe others. So
Yeah,
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 let's give it a
yeah.
minute.
We are planning to integrate with more BI tools. Tableau is next on the roadmap. It's going to be released probably in a couple months here. Holistics. Um, I'm not too familiar with them. I think one of their BDRs or AEs reached out to me, and that's my kind of touch points with them.
I think
But
Power BI is also on the horizon. So
yeah,
yeah, we're kind of similar to database support. We're building out BI integrations, just trying to follow demand, get the most people up and running as soon as possible. Um, yeah, and so the Tableau integration, it would look similar to what Sung showed you with Looker, where you would see the downstream dashboards in CI when you're making changes to a pull, when you're working on a pull request, you'd see which dashboards are impacted. And then you would also see those dashboards in column level lineage. So you could see which dashboards were downstream of any given uh, table in your warehouse.
Exactly. And just to make sure we're really clear, think about this, but with Tableau terminology and a Tableau logo.
And Sung, if
So
you hide the filters and zoom a little, it'll just give us a little bit more. Yeah, so you can see you can see all those interconnections between Looker assets. I think with Tableau, it might be more along the lines of like one layer of dashboards. I'm not familiar enough with Tableau to know if there's like layers of dependencies within Tableau, um, but you would see the dashboards downstream of Snowflake or Redshift or BigQuery tables.
exactly.
We don't have integrations with data catalogs right now. We do have a couple of catalog features within Datafold. So if you here, I can actually, or maybe Sung, I'm not sure if you have, do you have the demo instance opened?
I don't right now. No.
Okay. I can try to pull that up while we're chatting, but so we don't have integrations with other catalogs. We do offer some cataloging features within Lineage. So for each lineage table, we will automatically generate summary statistics, import DBT descriptions, so you can have consistency between your DBT docs and what is seen in Datafold. Keep in mind that if you are using Datafold Cloud, any number of business users can sign up as kind of viewers of Datafold. So so they can view diff results. And so on. And so, yeah, so let me just show you what that looks like. I'm gonna share again. I just had to log in and out again because I have like 14 different instances. Let me make sure this is the right one. Yep, that's it. Yeah, so what you're seeing is, this is worth noting as well. You can actually see the diffs are grouped by PR. Sam, can you validate that you're all seeing that? On
Yes.
this, okay. Yeah, so PR90, you can see this was run a couple of times. Each set of diffs is triggered by like a commit or opening a new PR. So that's kind of how these things stay organized. Now, if you look at our lineage that Sung was showing earlier, if I just click on dimorgs here, you will see that same lineage graph. And so you can see, this is what's downstream of dimorgs. If I collapse this and hold on a second. Here, I'll just open up this one. You can see what's downstream of what goes into sales sync. So num users, for example, that's nothing's downstream of that, but sub created at has 3 downstreams, right? Now, if you click on this, you can actually look at the SQL query. So that kind of just more richly shows you how we're building lineage by parsing query history. And then if you actually click on the table profile, you can see any DBT descriptions, any DBT tags that were created, a table description that you can write within Datafold, and a distribution of each of the values in each of the columns. So long answer, had to pull up a couple different things to get you there. Here's the row count, the column count, any upstream dependencies. But the point is, no, we don't integrate with any catalogs at this time. We do offer some catalog functionality within Datafold.
Yeah. Cool. Does that answer your question, Matt? Oh, perfect.
There
There
we
we go.
go. Nice.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All righty. Anything else missing from this conversation?
Just to emphasize what Sung has mentioned a couple of times, we appreciate you all openly asking these questions in the chat, kind of bearing with us as we coax you. But we are, we love talking to people, kind of hearing what's going on in your data environment, figuring out if Datafold is a fit. There's a lot of entry points as we've discussed. So, if you're willing to ask a question in the chat, that's awesome. But equally, find time. We can have kind of a more free-form conversation. I think Sung calls that free-form jazz.
Yeah,
And
I
so
do.
he does. And so that's that would be a great next step. You've also got, you've got the DBT Slack. You've got, I think I dropped my email earlier in the chat. So, a lot of ways to get in touch.
Yeah, how about this even? I gave you full permission to DM me any questions, complaints, praises you want on LinkedIn, and we can evolve the conversation from there. If you don't feel comfortable posting this chat or like, oh hey, 2 hours later I have this great question. Too bad the webinar's over. Like, let's talk to Sung over LinkedIn. All right.
You can also DM Sung to complain about me and vice versa. So, if there's something you want to say to one but not the other.
Yeah. Very cool. Looks like Gleb is typing here.
Awesome. Well, Sung, I want to, while we're waiting for Gleb to finish typing, imagine saying thanks for being here, etc. I want to thank you, congratulate you on leading your first Datafold Cloud demo day. So Sung joined the team a month or two ago, and it's been just an amazing force multiplier to have him
Yeah.
on board, bringing all his knowledge from DBT Labs and good energy. So yeah,
Yeah,
this has
yeah,
just been
for
really
sure.
great.
Yeah, and I'll let the crowd know here. Like I've just have such an intrinsic motivation to see you folks data diff, just because uh, it's just so absurd to me how like error prone and tedious the data engineering workflow really is, and that just shouldn't be normal anymore in 2023, right? And I think data diff is just such a great attack vector, because it's simple, right? Because who doesn't want to melt away 20 ad hoc SQL queries away from the workflow with just a single command and move on with their lives? Um, and if you get that to feel that charm that I feel, like that's a win for me. All right. Um, with that in mind, thanks, Gleb. You're going to share the recording in Calendly. Sean, I'm going to wait for you to finish typing before I officially close this out. And then we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Glad we could all be here. And yeah, Sean, I'm glad you said that because before I joined Datafold, I realized that I had kind of an acute and painful need for data diffing. I was, working on a data team, and I realized I, I, I couldn't feel confident about some of the changes that we needed to make to our code, but we had to do something. Yeah, tried to build something in-house. Long story short, got something up and running, but realized that Datafold was doing exactly what I realized, what I knew the data world needed. It kind of blew my mind that this wasn't out there and this wasn't like a tool that everyone was using already, that this had to be some new thing. And the truth is, people have been data diffing for a while, but it's always been, a notebook or ad hoc queries, kind of just not enough. A lot of work for not really a great result. And it takes like kind of superhuman effort and diligence to really do this unless you have it baked into your workflows. So yeah, I wish I had known earlier too, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
yeah, really,
All right.
really good story. I'm sure you have a richer story around that you can share sometime.
Yeah. Cool. With that in mind, I want to respect everyone's time and energy here. Thank you again for coming. In summation, check out Datafold. Do a data diff with our CLI. Book time with us. You're going to see some follow up from Gleb and Sarah on the team with a recording and a Calendly. And we just want to see you win. DM us anytime. We're happy to help and see you evolve. All right. Cool.
Awesome.
Peace out,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
See you.